Hello everyone. Imagine you are in a place where your identity has been erased and replaced by a 5-digit number tattooed on your skin. You are in a world where the people in charge want to turn you into a machine, or worse, into nothing at all. This is the story of Mala Zimetbaum, prisoner 19880. But she was never just a number. While thousands of people were trying to just survive another hour, Mala was planning how to break the entire system from the inside. She wasn't a soldier with a gun or a general with a map. She was a young woman who spoke 5 languages and had a job that made her invisible to the guards. She was a runner, a person who carried messages across the camp, and she used that tiny bit of freedom to become the most dangerous person in the world to the people running the camp. If you think the most powerful weapon in a war is a person's will to remain human, type the word heart in the comments right now. And if you want to see history told through the eyes of the people who actually lived it, make sure you stay with us and subscribe to the channel. We don't do the usual textbook stories here. We look at the choices that changed everything. To understand Mala, you have to look at why she was different. She was born in Poland, but grew up in Belgium, which is why she spoke so many languages. When she was arrested and sent to the camp in 1942, the guards realized almost immediately that she was too useful to waste in the fields or the factories. They needed someone who could translate their orders and move between the different sections of the camp. They made her a Lagerläuferin, or a camp runner. In their eyes, she was just a tool, a high-functioning piece of equipment. Because she spoke German, Polish, French, Dutch, and Italian, she could talk to almost anyone. This gave her a special armband and the right to move around when everyone else was locked behind barbed wire. But while the guards thought they were using her, she was actually using them. She saw everything. She knew which guards were lazy, which ones were cruel, and most importantly, she knew how the paperwork of the camp worked. She started using her position to smuggle food and medicine to people who were sick. She would change the names on the lists of people who were marked for the worst tasks. If she saw a name on a list that meant someone was going to be sent away, she would sometimes swap it for someone who had already passed away. She was playing a high-stakes game of chess with the lives of thousands, and she did it every single day for 2 years without getting caught. Mala's daily routine was a masterclass in staying calm under pressure. As a runner, she had access to the administrative offices, the places where the fate of every prisoner was decided on paper. She would walk into these offices with a stack of messages, looking perfectly professional and obedient. While the SS officers were busy drinking coffee or complaining about their assignments, Mala was looking at the files on their desks. She learned how to mimic their handwriting and how to navigate the complicated bureaucracy they had created. If a prisoner was too weak to work, they were usually marked for removal. Mala would see these marks, and when the officers weren't looking, she would use her pen to turn a removal mark into a recovery mark. She saved hundreds of people this way, all while standing just a few feet away from the men who would have executed her on the spot if they knew what she was doing. She didn't have a weapon, but her pen and her ability to stay silent were more effective than a rifle. She became known among the prisoners as a shadow that brought hope. People would whisper her name in the dark, telling stories of how she had appeared out of nowhere with a piece of bread or a life-saving bit of news. But Mala didn't want to just help people survive. She wanted to tell the world what was happening. She knew that as long as the camp was a secret, the nightmare would never end. That was when she met Edek Galiński. Edek was a Polish political prisoner, one of the very first people sent to the camp. He had been there since 1940, and was a veteran of the underground resistance inside the walls. They fell in love in a place where love was considered impossible. They didn't have romantic dinners or long walks. They had whispered conversations in the shadows and quick glances while they were working. Edek told her about his plan to escape. He had a friend who was a guard, someone who wasn't like the others, who had promised to help him get an SS uniform. Edek's plan was simple but terrifying. He would dress up as a guard and lead Mala out of the front gate as if he were taking a prisoner for a work detail. It was a plan that relied entirely on the arrogance of the guards. They believed that no one would ever dare to walk out the front gate in broad daylight. Mala and Edek decided to prove them wrong. They weren't just escaping for themselves. They were carrying documents and evidence to show the Polish resistance what was really happening inside the fences. The logistics of their plan were incredibly risky. Edek had to secure a full SS uniform, including the boots and the hat, which was nearly impossible to hide in a camp where everything was searched. He relied on a network of trusted friends and even a sympathetic guard who realized the war was turning against Germany. Mala, meanwhile, had to secure a map of the surrounding area and a civilian dress to wear once they were far enough away from the camp. She hid these items under her mattress, knowing that a single surprise inspection would mean her death. They spent months refining every detail. They had to know the exact schedule of the gate guards and which ones were the most likely to be distracted. They decided that a Saturday afternoon would be the best time, as the routine was often more relaxed during the weekend. Every time they looked at each other, they knew they were looking at a person who might not be alive the next day. But the hope of being free and telling the truth was stronger than their fear. On the 24th of June, 1944, they made their move. This is the part of the story that sounds like a movie, but it was completely real. Edek put on the stolen uniform, and Mala put on a pair of work overalls and a large hat to hide her hair. They walked toward the gate called Arbeit Macht Frei. Imagine the tension in that moment. Every step they took could have been their last. As they approached the gate, the guards on duty didn't even look twice. They saw a man in a uniform they respected and a prisoner who looked like she was being moved for work. The guards actually saluted Edek as he walked by. They didn't ask for papers. They didn't double-check his face. Their own system of hierarchy and blind obedience was exactly what Mala and Edek used to defeat them. They walked out of the gate and into the woods, leaving the most heavily guarded place on earth behind them. For the first time in 2 years, Mala wasn't a number. She was free. They spent 2 weeks on the run, trying to reach the border with Slovakia. They had very little food and had to hide in the mountains, but they were together and they were out. If you remember hearing this part of the story before, or if you have an opinion on their bravery, let me know in the comments. Do you think you could have kept your cool while walking past those guards? The 2 weeks they spent in the mountains were both the happiest and hardest days of their lives. For the first time, they were able to talk without whispering. They could see the stars without a fence in the way. They stayed in mountain huts, sometimes getting help from local farmers who were part of the resistance. They were carrying a folder full of documents that detailed the scale of the crimes being committed back in the camp. Their goal was to get these documents to the Polish underground so they could be broadcast to the world. They thought they were going to make it. They were only a few miles from the border, almost at the finish line, when their luck ran out. In early July, they were caught near the town of Bielsko. Some accounts say they were trying to buy bread, and others say they were simply spotted by a patrol. Because they were so close to the border, the security was extremely tight. They were arrested and sent back. When they were brought back to the camp, the guards were furious. The fact that a Jewish girl and a Polish prisoner had fooled them so easily was an insult to their entire ideology. The return to the camp was a nightmare. They were not sent back to their old positions, they were taken straight to the death block. The guards wanted to make an example of them. They were kept in separate cells and tortured for weeks. The SS officers were desperate to know who had helped them. They wanted to find the guard who had provided the uniform and the prisoners who had helped smuggle the civilian clothes. They used every method they could think of to break them. But Mala and Edek never said a word. They had a pact to protect everyone who had helped them, and they stuck to it. Even in the darkness of the punishment cells, they managed to send messages to each other. Prisoners who worked in the block would whisper updates through the cracks in the doors. The entire camp was watching and waiting. The story of their escape had already become a legend among the other prisoners. Even though they were back in chains, the fact that they had gotten out at all gave everyone else a reason to keep fighting. The guards realized that by bringing them back alive, they had accidentally created 2 heroes. The end of the story is what makes Mala Zimetbaum a legend. On the 15th of September 1944, the camp authorities decided to hold a public execution. They wanted to use Mala and Edek to scare the other prisoners. They set up 2 gallows in different parts of the camp. Mala was brought out in front of thousands of women. The guards expected her to be crying or begging for her life. They wanted her to look like a victim. But as the SS officer began to read her sentence, Mala reached into her sleeve. She had smuggled a small razor with her. Right there, in front of everyone, she cut her own wrists. She chose her own end before they could take it from her. When the SS officer, a man named Reuters, tried to stop her and grab her arm, Mala did something that no one expected. She took her bloody hand and slapped him across the face as hard as she could. She told him, in a voice that everyone could hear, that she was dying a hero while he would die a coward. She told the other women to stay strong and that the end of the war was coming. The scene was pure chaos. The thousands of women watching were in shock. The guards didn't know how to react because their ceremony of fear had been turned into an act of rebellion. Reuters was humiliated in front of his own men and the prisoners he was supposed to control. He began to shout and beat Mala, but she just looked at him with no fear in her eyes. She had already won. The guards tried to rush her to the hospital so they could save her just to kill her again, but she passed away on the way. At the same time, in the men's camp, Edek had also refused to follow their script. He tried to put his own head in the noose before they could do it for him, shouting, "Long live Poland," before the stool was kicked away. They both died on their own terms. They didn't die as victims. They died as fighters who had won a psychological war against their captors. This is the real climax of the story. It wasn't the escape that broke the Nazi myth. It was the fact that Mala and Edek refused to be afraid of them even at the very end. They proved that you can take someone's freedom, you can take their name, and you can take their life, but you cannot take their dignity if they refuse to give it to you. We tell this story because it is easy to look at history as a series of big events, but it is actually a series of individual choices. Mala Zimetbaum chose to help people when it would have been easier to just save herself. She chose to fall in love when the world was full of hate, and she chose to fight back when everyone told her it was impossible. She was the angel of Birkenau, and her legacy lived on in every prisoner who saw her slap that guard and realized that the people in the uniforms weren't gods. They were just men who could be stood up to. If you think Mala's final act of defiance is one of the most powerful moments in history, type justice in the comments. We want to know what you think about this kind of courage. Thank you for spending time with us today to remember Mala and Edek. These stories are the only way we can make sure that the people who were turned into numbers are never forgotten. If you want to keep exploring the hidden corners of history and the people who stood up when the world went dark, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. We have a lot more stories like this one coming, and your support helps us keep the truth alive. We will see you in the next video, where we dive back into the moments that truly shaped our world. Stay curious and never forget the power of a single person to make a difference.